Chatgerry, pattern recognition before disease, how watching a health movie beats looking at medical snapshots. Number 1524, VPT 80, the 5th of February 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category, Medicine Methodology. Preface, why I look at medicine differently. When I first began my medical self-study and research journey 17 years ago, the traditional biochemical approach felt unfamiliar to me. This was not because I dismissed it, but because my academic roots were elsewhere. My training was in computer science, mathematics, physics, and engineering. I learned to understand systems through equations, data, theories, laws, structures, forces, energy, and time, rather than by focusing only on individual molecules and their internal chemical instruction chains. Over the past 17 years, I have worked intensely, often 13 to 14 hours a day. I studied more than 10,000 medical papers and collected over 4 million data points from my own body. Through this long and personal process, I became familiar with pathophysiology in a practical and meaningful way. I do not claim to match professional biochemists at the molecular level. By biochemical standards alone, I am still behind. However, when it comes to dynamics, time dependence, path dependence, cumulative damage, and system behavior over years or decades, I am far ahead. These are the areas where most medical research is weakest. Modern medicine is excellent at naming parts and pathways, but it often struggles to explain how damage accumulates, why recovery has limits, and how diseases slowly develop over time. I say this honestly, not proudly. Honesty is the most important quality of a scientist. Pretending equal expertise everywhere would be dishonest. Denying real strengths would be dishonest as well. My strength lies in pattern recognition across time, built from decades of engineering practice and personal medical experience. Why snapshots fail and movies matter. Most medical research relies on snapshots, a blood test today, a CT image this year, a comparison between baseline and endpoint during a quarterly visit. Even studies called longitudinal often compare only to time points, but human disease does not behave like a snapshot. It behaves like a movie. Chronic diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, stroke risk, and cancer risk develop slowly. Damage accumulates quietly. Recovery is partial and often limited. Short-term measurements miss the true story. A simple example explains this clearly. One blood glucose reading per quarter from a lab is a snapshot, but 1,440 glucose readings in a single day, 1 per minute, reveal patterns, fluctuations, stress responses, and recovery limits that a snapshot can never show. To understand health and disease, we must watch the movie, not stare at a single frame through still snapshot. What VMT and TDA are, in plain words, my work uses two tools together. The first is viscoplastic medicine theory VMT. VMT looks at how stress accumulates in the body over time. It treats disease as a process of energy buildup and irreversible damage, similar to how materials deform and eventually fail in engineering. VMT answers questions such as, why did the system change? Which factors mattered most? When did damage become hard to reverse? The second is topological data analysis TDA. TDA looks at shape and structure. It uses simple geometry, such as 2D and 3D plots, to show how health states cluster, separate, stabilize, or collapse over time. TDA answers a different set of questions. What has the system become? VMT explains cause and dominance. TDA confirms structure and stability. They do not compete. They complete each other. Why this is different from mainstream medicine. In modern medicine, pathology focuses on damaged tissue and abnormal cell structure. Physiology focuses on biochemistry and organ function. Cancer research focuses on damaged genes and abnormal signals that tell cells to grow, divide, or stop. Systems biology uses equations but often lacks real-time continuity. Biomechanics focuses on how tissues stretch and fluids flow, but not on how damage permanently accumulates over time. These approaches are valuable, but they are mostly descriptive and snapshot-based. They rarely treat disease as a long-term, cumulative, irreversible process governed by energy and time. Viscoplasticity, a concept widely used in engineering to study permanent damage, is almost never applied to physiology. Topology is used in limited ways, often only for medical imaging or clustering, and almost never combined with viscoplastic thinking. I did not find an existing medical framework that connects these ideas into a unified system for studying long-term human health. That is why I built one. Why individual data matters more than population averages. At a large scale, human bodies look similar. At a small scale, every body is unique. Traditional statistics work well for populations. They tell us what happens on average. However, severe disease, life-threatening complications, and death are extreme cases. In statistical terms, they are outliers. And outliers are exactly what traditional statistics handle poorly. My approach follows one body across time. It tracks how stress builds, how recovery stalls, and how structure changes year by year. It turns snapshots into a continuous movie. This explains why short-term treatments often disappoint and why prevention must start early. Once damage accumulates past a certain point, reversal becomes limited, no matter how aggressive the treatment. Why my work exists outside traditional medicine. I do not hold an MD degree, and I am not trying to replace physicians. Doctors usually meet patients after damage has already occurred. My work focuses earlier, when people still have choices and leverage. I understand finance and economics. I have served as a high-tech CEO. I know that effective lifestyle management reduces revenue for certain industries. That reality exists, but I am also a patient. Over the past 3 decades, I have faced 9 serious mortality threats. I know fear, uncertainty, loneliness, and the heavy burden carried by families and loved ones. When you stand in that position, market growth and institutional profit fade in tough background. Life becomes the only priority. I do not accuse or attack. I simply state facts. From a patient's perspective, life matters more than profit. From a scientist's perspective, truth matters more than fame, power, or money. Why one limit complexity on purpose? My software limits the number of input factors on purpose. Human understanding breaks down in very high dimensions. 5 meaningful inputs are far better than 50 weak ones. Low-dimensional geometry can be seen, understood, and questioned. Black box sophisticated models cannot. This is not a technical limitation. It is a design choice for human clarity. Why I call this viscoplastopology VPT. After nearly 900 VMT energy studies and more than 70 TD analyses, these 2 patterns became intuitive to me. Energy curves and geometric shapes began to tell the same story from different angles. High energy means instability. Energy reduction means structural collapse and stabilization. Plateaus mean limits. This integration led me to name the framework Viscoplasties VPT in November 2025. It is not a new mathematical theory. It is a new way of seeing complex human disease and health as a system. A personal note: the deeper motivation behind this work comes from my father. He was one of the first German-trained surgeons in China more than 100 years ago and devoted his life to medicine and his patients. He passed away in 1991, before my success in high-tech business in 1995, and long before my medical journey began in 2010. I did not repeat his path. I continued it differently. He used his hands and skills. I used data, equations, time, and persistence. The tools changed. The purpose did not. Closing medicine today treats disease after it appears. My work exists upstream. VMT explains why damage accumulates. DDA shows what the system becomes. Together, they offer a human-centered way to understand long-term health, disease risk, and recovery. Not as snapshots, but as a living movie. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights belong to the author, Gerald C. HSU. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C. HSU.